All right, so I've talked about Lucid a couple times on this channel, and most recently with the Lucid Air Sapphire, which I called the best performance SUV ever made. I really like Lucids. I think they're great products, but they've never been the most popular ones in the world. They've been sedans, they've been pretty expensive, and so this is Lucid's first entry into a new vehicle category that may just be enough to save them, although I don't really think I need to use those phrases, but it might turn over a new leaf for them, because this is an SUV. SUVs are very popular here in the US. And so this is called the Lucid Gravity. Just like the intro to this video, it's different. I mean, it's kind of the same, but it's definitely different. Obviously, if you've seen the Air before, you've seen the silhouette, you can recognize obviously already some of the pieces like this front little visor here. And you might have already actually watched my initial impressions video of the Lucid Gravity from a couple months back when it was stationary in a showroom. But now I've gotten to drive it for a little bit, and well, spoiler alert, a lot of the things that you expect out of a Lucid are still here, which is good news. They're really good at a lot of stuff like the engineering and the efficiency and the packaging. And then there's some stuff that's a little bit surprising too, and you'll pretty quickly get to that. So let me just start with the outside, because I think this is a little bit more minivan looking than I remember. So let me know what you think about the looks. So here goes your side profile. You know, this is the all black Lucid Air Grand Touring. You can see a little bit of the sporty aero feature back here, but I think there's some minivan inspiration or DNA. Not a bad thing. This is a 3-row, very functional vehicle, and minivans are very functional, so I'm not complaining. It's got that stealth blackout package, and it does have a couple optional extras that bring it up to our $122,000 as spec'd, including this Tahoe interior. It's got larger 21-inch and 22-inch wheels. It's got rear wheel steering. It's got a couple other things that Miles will talk about in the driving section. But in general, yeah, it's all-wheel drive, dual motor, 900-volt architecture, and rated for up to 450 miles of range. So right off the bat, let me just talk about the range for a second, because when I read on paper that the Lucid Gravity Grand Touring, this is the first spec available of this thing, is gonna have 450 miles of range on like a 100-ish kilowatt-hour battery and have 828 horsepower, that feels impossible for one vehicle to have both things, crazy efficiency and ridiculous power. So the expectations are sky high. Then I got to test it and drive it, and I never actually got anywhere near 450 miles of range. I started daily driving this thing, and you know, there are some options that make it heavier. For example, the 450 mile range version would be the 2-row 5-seater. It would have the smallest 20 and 21-inch wheels. This has bigger wheels. This has a little bit more weight inside, but I never even saw 400 miles of range. I think the highest I ever got was at 100% pulling out the driveway, 386 miles of range, which is still really good. But you know, obviously that brings it a little bit down to earth. Expectations are the thief of joy. I shouldn't be all mad that this doesn't get 450, but this is a very aerodynamic vehicle still. You see the visor, you see the active aero features, the flaps that open and close based on when you need ventilation. Also on these wheels, they are bigger and hurt your range, but you can pop off these aero covers and get a little bit less range if you want to. But this is the best case scenario for these bigger wheels, getting almost 400 miles of range. This is the first and only vehicle in Lucid's lineup with the NACS port. So you can charge in with no adapter in the US at Tesla superchargers, which is pretty sick. The Lucid Airs still don't have NACS ports. I thought maybe the Sapphire would have it by now, or maybe they just refreshed the entire lineup. That's a decision they're gonna have to make at some point. But yeah, for now, just the Gravity has NACS. And you know, if you take price out of the equation, maybe, just maybe, this is the closest thing we have to the Li Auto Mega for the US. Like if there was a Li Auto Mega in the US, it would be an electric 3-row SUV with all the bleeding edge tech and awesome efficiency and NACS, like kind of like this, right? Okay, let me look at this front truck now. So this is the key fob to the Lucid Gravity. It's also attached here to a key card that I've been using more because I have had some issues with the key fob. Not the first time that's happened to me in a Lucid, but to open the front trunk, you obviously have that front trunk button right here. Hold it, really loud external speakers, and then the front trunk pops open. It's decently sized. You can definitely do groceries here. You can also definitely sit here if you want to, but that is hyper functional. And obviously they have these huge clamshell openings on the front and the back, so lovely to see that. And then yeah, might as well, while we're here, go ahead around the back, hold down the trunk opening button. And this is your classic Lucid massive clamshell opening to a huge amount of rear space. That's my bad. Sometimes our little plate covers fall off because they're just taped on. Let me know if you have a suggestion for a better one. Anyway, okay, this is an example of the incredible practicality and space and packaging that Lucid is capable of. They've already done an awesome job with the Air. This is the back of the Gravity. This is the third row, that is the second row, and that's the first row way up there. Already a ton of space, but you can see I have it set up like this because I wanted to just show you something. You can fold the back seat, the third row, completely flat into this back cubby space here. So you can have two back seats, or you can fold both of them back in here. If you have the two back seats up, obviously that's a ton of storage. And then you have these buttons to fold down the second row. So I'll just go ahead and fold down the right side second row here. I'll press that, it kind of moves the front seat forward and then drops that row also completely flat. So you can go totally flat with all of these seats and fit a ridiculous amount of stuff back here. Done a lot of really clever work with the battery being all the way in the floor and all of the spacing of the seats and everything. And I think what you've ended up with, which is a crazy stat, is the same amount of interior storage space as the Cadillac Escalade IQ, but 3 feet shorter, which is pretty sick. And once you get inside, Lucid's theme of really good packaging and high tech definitely continues. You can close the front trunk, powered from that button, that huge clamshell front trunk. And you can see there's a 12.5-inch touchscreen over here and also a huge amount of screen behind the steering wheel. And so they've done this little squircle thing here, which is a little bit flatter on top so you can see the screen better. It's a little lower than you might expect it to be, and it's a little bit smaller than you might expect it to be, but it's actually really comfortable, and I find it pretty nice. The visibility is also massive because this huge amount of glass goes way up above your head, kind of like a Tesla Model X. Probably is really expensive to replace if you get a chip in it, but that is a lot of light coming in. And then this interior is as nice as I remember it. Lucid does a really good job in the Airs, and this is definitely no exception. This is the Tahoe brown leather interior with these heated, massaging, well-bolstered seats. A lot of the touch points, a lot of the areas that you're resting on are nice, soft leather. There's also the door handle. I had a couple weird problems where it took 2 tries to open the door handle from the driver's side only. Might just be a bit of a bug, but these glass windows are, I'll show you, insulated, double insulated. It's super quiet in the cabin. This also has the upgraded speakers, so there's 22 speakers in this cabin. I don't even really see most of them. You can see like a little bit of the speaker stuff up here and up here, but 22 speakers in here. I would say the speakers sound pretty good. They're Dolby Atmos capable. They're not amazing, not like S tier like some of the highest end vehicles I've ever tried, but definitely really, really nice, especially when the cabin's so quiet. Riding along, and we'll talk about driving in a second, but riding along super, super smooth. And then plenty of storage here. So this can obviously open and close. You have this interior storage down here, which goes underneath. And then when you open this, you can also move this back and fit even more stuff under here. This is the spot where the key card rests, but it's also a 15-watt wireless charger for your phone. Not quite Liado Mega status, but you know, good to have a wireless charger. And then here, oh yeah, here's a sponsor to this video, the Insta360 X5. You know, the Lucid Gravity does have surround view cameras built in for parking, which is convenient, obviously, but a 360 camera like this represents a really good way for content creators who are making car videos to be able to unlock way more shots using a 360 camera. 360 cameras, if we're being honest, haven't had the best rap for quality specifically in the past, but this is a generation that gets us to up to 8K 360 video. So you do have a lot of room and a lot of pixels to move around and crop in and get your shots that actually still look crisp and good. And this even has larger sensors, unlike the Pixel I'm shooting on, than the last generation. So the last one, the X3 and X4, I think had 1/2-inch sensors. There's a 1/1.28-inch sensor, so it's letting in 144% more light and has killer low light performance too. And then of course it makes it easy to edit 360 video with its AI editing, because the AI just keeps whatever is the subject in the frame as it's moving around the 360 sphere that this is recording in, so you don't have to do a whole bunch of manual reframing. There's a ton of other features in this thing too, from the better stabilization to the improved, you know, wind noise filtering, and single and triple suction mounts let you get some crazy angles and crazy shots with a camera like this. So The first 50 people to order through the link down below will get a free selfie stick and car suction cup mount to go shoot some car videos. So be sure to check that out if you're interested, and thanks to Insta360 for sponsoring this video. So I'm gonna hand it to Miles in a minute for some more in-depth thoughts, specifically on driving dynamics on a car like this with 800 plus horsepower and rear wheel steering and all sorts of other interesting features. But the two things that struck me most while daily driving and living with the Lucid Gravity that kind of aren't really a surprise, but I was still glad to see it, are, like I said, the packaging and storage space again, and this software was actually really good and intuitive. You have kind of like two separate software environments going on with the 12.5-inch screen here and then the touchscreen environment up here. Lucid people will already sort of be used to what's happening here, which is, oh, I said the magic L word, so now it's listening to me and it's gonna try to figure out what I wanna say, but I'm not giving it a command, so maybe cancel, stop doing that. Like this all the way over here, this is familiar to Lucid people. You kind of have this habit now of like grabbing the left-hand side, and you always know you can unlock over here or defrost or do headlights or open the tailgate. That's always over there. And then this left side is also a touchscreen to get through a couple other little bits of information, or just go zen and just have nothing over there. But I usually have my local range, and that typically updates pretty quickly, once every couple seconds. And then over here is a touchscreen, which is always just your normal car stuff. And then underneath it, this 12.5-inch screen is totally separate. So whatever I do up here, it never affects what goes down here. It's kind of the opposite of what was happening with the last Lucids, where you could drag stuff between them. So let's say I have maps open up here, which I think that's a pretty normal thing to have up here. That will never get interrupted no matter what you do down here. So if you want to do HVAC controls, or if you want to do your phone settings or your media, or even another instance of maps if you really wanted to. I think I can do that, yeah. It will never interrupt what happens up here because they're separate. So I like that a lot. I also love that this volume button is always really easily accessible, and your HVAC controls are always just a few taps away because these are physical buttons. So that's awesome. And then there's like this programmable button, which just does the glove box for now, which I think is good because having to go to the touchscreen for the glove box is insane. Real HVAC vents, which is great. Here's one slight complaint you might have though. No Apple CarPlay, at least for now, out the box. It's supposed to be coming with an OTA update, but as of right now, the car I'm driving does not have CarPlay, which is kind of a bummer. So I'm just pairing my phone and doing media with my Bluetooth connection. But yeah, all of these settings are super easy to navigate through. Sprint mode is the fastest mode with the lowest ride height. Swift is somewhere in the middle, and then smooth you can have like a medium or even higher average suspension with normal, high, or off regen. Love that. Anytime you swipe down from the bottom, these are always the quick controls. So if you want to do pet mode, if you want to do battery preconditioning, or just change the volume, or brightness, then you can always do that, or go glove box. But then these are all the normal things you might do in a car. You might want to turn on your massaging seats. This is the first massaging seat I've had actually have a butt massage as well. I don't know if you're into that, but usually massaging seats just do the back. This one also does the butt. Cool. You have your HVAC controls, you have your energy graphs, so you can see if you're using more or less energy than expected, your music, your media again, and then you even have this like Zen mode thing, so you can sit back and the screens get taken over and it plays this nature sounds. I personally didn't use that, but it's a cool thought. And then of course your 360 parking cameras. So software is really easy to go through. It's stable, it's quick. There's no CarPlay for now, which is a bummer, but hopefully that comes very soon. You know, as cool as they are, I ended up not really using these touch sensitive areas on the steering wheel that much. They built these in so that you can, without ever taking your hand off the squircle, move around and control the stuff on the main touchscreen back here. And that's pretty cool. It even has haptic feedback, and it has dedicated voice control buttons, and it has another customizable button here. But I ended up just doing a lot of reaching like I did in old Lucids, which is, you know, maybe just habit, and maybe if I used it even longer, I'd get lazy and start touching the steering wheel for that control a little bit more. But I did notice that, you know, this is a really cool high-tech thing that I really appreciated in my first hands-on, and then ended up not using very much. Just food for thought. But let me show you the second row, because you get a vehicle like this, of course, not just to sit in the front seat, but to have people sit in the second set of seats too. And, well, first thing you'll notice is there is a ton of legroom, which is awesome. Footroom and headroom. Glass roof. You also have the screens, which people seem to really like. There's way more speakers in the back row all over the place, and there's also vents in really nice spots. But maybe the most interesting thing, as I go to ultra wide here, is this laptop tray in the second row of the Gravity. So you can get your work done if you're being chauffeured around in one of these things. There's also that second row HVAC controls as well. Now I'm going to attempt to go to the third row through the side here. It's probably going to be extremely awkward and not very graceful, but I'm going to do it anyway because we need to see what the legroom is like behind the second row for third row passengers. And you know what? It's not bad. I haven't actually sat back here yet, so I'm just sort of evaluating it in real time. This is slightly better than the Rivian R1S. This is worse than the Cadillac Escalade IQ as far as third row legroom, but it's not a bad space to be. There's vents again back here. There's still a ton of sunroof, and there's a little bit of storage. USB Type-C, that's nice. And there it is. I mean, I'm up against it, so if I had another seat next to me, they'd also be up against it. But that's pretty good. That's decent third row. So in a vehicle that's not really much bigger than a typical, van, this is a good third row space to be. Headroom is maybe the only tiny weakness. So without any further ado, let me throw it to Miles to talk a little bit more about what it's like driving one of the most advanced driving three-row electric SUVs ever made.
Chrysler never had the guts to build a Pacifica Hellcat, and Toyota's probably never going to make a GR Sienna. And the legendary R63 AMG, well, that minivan is gone. But Lucid have answered the call, and this thing is amazing to drive. Let me firstly preface this review by saying this is effectively the middle tier trim of Lucid Gravity. There's a Dream Edition of the GT that has 200 extra horsepower on top of this and can run a 10.6 in the quarter mile. And hopefully there will eventually be a Sapphire version of this car. But man, let me tell you, this is plenty enough for me. It is incredibly difficult to make a 7-seater SUV / minivan style car drive in a way that massages the enthusiast lobe on my brain. But somehow, Lucid have done it. Not that I should be surprised at this point. The first way in which it's doing that is by how low it is to the ground, as you've seen from the outside of the car, but that applies to the inside of the car as well. You can set the seat to go super low, the steering wheel too, to have a very driver-focused driving position. And then when you take this thing into corners and bends, the body roll, at least for a nearly 7,000-pound SUV with me inside of it, is really minimal. You couldn't tell this car weighs nearly 7,000 pounds by the way it just goes down a back road like an absolute scalpel. Gravity does 0 to 60 in about 3.5 seconds, which isn't phenomenal for an EV. Obviously, we've tested cars that can go quicker than that, but you can tell there's definitely some software limitation on the launch control. I definitely think they're sandbagging it a bit via software, and I think that might just be because they're trying to save room for a more performance-oriented version of the car. But either way, you're still blowing the doors off of pretty much every other 7-seater that isn't electrified. Now, this Squircle-style steering wheel isn't my favorite kind of steering wheel. I definitely prefer the setup they have in the Air, but I can understand why Lucid went with this style of wheel for Gravity, and it certainly isn't hard to get used to as far as maneuvering Gravity. And because the steering is so sharp and responsive and almost steer-by-wire-like, you don't really have to do a whole lot of movement like you would with a traditional wheel. But when you're not sending it down a back road, which isn't really something a lot of Gravity owners will do anyway, the suspension is very refined, it's supple and compliant, it handles uneven pavement and potholes pretty well given the size and weight of the car and given how low it sits to the ground. Even at the lowest ride height, it's still extremely compliant with crappy New Jersey roads, which I experience a lot of around here. And then the cabin itself is just so serene and peaceful and insulated. Compared to an R1S, it just feels a lot more refined and luxury oriented, but at the same time, a lot more sporty and enthusiast focused. It's really interesting. When I think of some of my favorite 7-seaters I've ever driven, I think of like the Escalade V, the Alpina XB7, Heck, even the Volvo EX90, that's a great one. The Gravity doesn't have the epic supercharged V8 gunshot burbles of the Escalade V or the luscious Lavalina leather of the Alpina XB7, but I think as an overall package, you could argue that this is the better car, just because it kind of does everything really well and just has that enthusiast and dynamic edge that somehow the Escalade and Alpina don't, even though those are internal combustion engine powered cars. This is easily my favorite 7-seater electric car that I've ever driven. When I'm driving this, I don't even think about the Model X or the R1S at all, just because this feels like so much more of a complete package. So now all we do is wait for the Sapphire version. That car is going to melt my brain.
All right, so let me just wrap this video up with a question that I don't really think we're gonna know the answer to anytime soon, but I think it's interesting to think about, which is something you might see in stockholder subreddits or just people wondering about this company, which is, can this vehicle save Lucid? Can the Gravity save the not very financially optimized company that is Lucid? And look, they're not making a ton of profit on every vehicle. I don't think they're making any profit on these vehicles yet. But I do think, because of how good this is and because of how popular this segment is, especially in the US, this, I think, does have the potential to become their most popular vehicle, their best-selling vehicle. I think if they have a Lucid Air, or a Gravity Touring that's cheaper, that maybe starts in the 80s or 90s, that can be even more likely to be their best-selling vehicle. I don't think it's gonna miraculously turn the whole company around on paper, but I just like the vehicles anyway. Like the Lucid Air Sapphire is in the same category for me as, like, okay, it's not gonna make their company profitable, but I'm glad it exists. I'm glad someone put that type of engineering work in to make such an incredible thing. And I kind of feel the same way about this. Only time will tell, though. Let me know what you think down below. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one. Peace.